Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Newbury, I'm Cypher's Head of Content. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Digits, which is how to choose an LMS, the ultimate three-stage selection process. I'm delighted to say that today we're joined by Andrea, who's our Head of LMS Sales, and Nev, who's L&D Manager here at Cypher Group. Andrea, could you start by telling us a little bit about your experience in the industry?
Sure, thanks, Catherine. So as Catherine said, I'm the LMS sales manager here at Cypher. I've been here a couple of years now, working within that LMS space, but I've got over a decade worth of educational edtech experience as well. So working within that sort of software space and in sales. So yeah, really excited to be here today, and hopefully we'll be sharing some good tips that you can take away for your next steps.
Lovely, thanks Andrea. And Nev, welcome. You're L&D Manager here at Cypher Group. Tell us a little bit about what that encompasses in your L&D background, please.
Yeah, good morning everyone, Nev Hart, and it's great to be here with you all today. So yeah, Learning and Development Manager here at Cypher. I've been here just over 3 months now, but been in the learning and development industry for over the last 5 to 6 years. Heavily automotive focused, but I was actually a customer of Digits LMS prior to joining Cypher. So been in the L&D space for quite a while now.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Nev. It's lovely to have you with us today. Your first Digits webinar with us, so we'll go easy on you. But as you can see, we've got loads of LMS and L&D expertise on the call today. If you're new to Digits, I'll just take you through who we are. We are a digital learning provider of both the learning management systems and bespoke learning content. We have more than 3 decades of experience in the industry. Our award-winning LMS, Digits LMS, is used by household names such as B&Q and Kia. We also create bespoke learning content for a range of clients. And Digits joined the wider Cypher Group in 2020. Here's the agenda for today. We'll start by looking at how to draw up your list of requirements when you first go out to market to look for a new LMS. And then we'll look into how to deal with the vendors that you'll be speaking to as you start to assess the market. Finally, we'll look at the essential features and functionalities that you should be looking for in your next LMS. There'll also be time for Andrea and Nev to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, do send them in using the control panel that you see on your screen now. The webinar is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to you tomorrow. Okay, we're going to start off with a quick poll just to understand where you are in your LMS selection process. So you should see that on your screen now. Please select the option that's most relevant. Do you know that you need an LMS but haven't started looking yet? You've built your requirement list, you've started assessing the market, you're actively speaking with vendors, or you've chosen a new LMS and will implement it soon. So Andrea, you speak with organisations who are in the market for a new LMS and are talking to vendors. Do you find that people tend to follow these steps in logical order, or perhaps they go to market first and then start to build that requirements list following conversations with vendors?
It could be a real mix of customers that I come across. So we've got some that, you know, particularly those customers who might typically go through a formal procurement process, RFP process. They will have done quite a lot of work leading up to that to define their requirements and have the relevant meetings internally to look at, you know, processes and what they need. I do have other customers that, you know, are really early stage. They sometimes use that initial market review just to help define what their requirements should be, particularly if they're coming from not having an LMS previously. They might not know what particularly they should be looking for. So they'll use those sort of initial conversations with us to kind of define what's out there, what could, you know, what the art of the possible really is, and then from there they might define a requirements list that we would then follow up with further conversations from there. So it could be a mix of the two. You know, I don't think it's ever too early stage to come and have a chat to us about what you need, but equally once you start getting into that later selection process, you know, it's ideal that you do have a very sort of clear list of what you need in terms of requirements so that you're making the right selection of the right provider really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for voting. I'm just going to share those results on screen now. So around a third of you say that you need an LMS but you haven't started looking at. You're really early stages of the selection process, so you're in a great place to start. Thank you for joining us. And then around 20% have started assessing the market, with around 15% have already started speaking with vendors. So quite a broad range of you at different stages of your LMS journey, but great to have you with us today. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Nev, who's going to talk to you a little bit about drawing up that list of requirements that we talked about.
Yeah, hi everyone, and definitely. So I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit of my experience in terms of selecting an LMS vendor and some of the considerations that really helped me when going through this process, and that will hopefully support you. So I guess the starting point when starting to think about your LMS is really starting at considering your stakeholders and ultimately their needs. The aim of an LMS is to ensure that it's engaging and that you've got full buy-in. So I guess when we start thinking about the executive team, it's a key priority is for motivation, engagement, and productivity, I guess, of the workforce. So in order to be able to create a workforce, you want to be confident that the teams will be aware of the workings of the LMS and how it will close the skills gap and performance gaps within the workforce. It's also our key stakeholders and chief executives' responsibility to make sure an investment is worth the money. So if they're spending money on the LMS, they want to make sure that the overall performance of the organisation will improve as a result of this, and they want to see a clear return on investment. We want to, as key stakeholders, the CEOs will make sure or want to make sure that there's ready access to the latest information of talent groups, and that the voluntary and mandatory training courses taken by employees and learning pathways are vital for the executive team. They will want to be able to monitor how learning is being carried out and what the ultimate impact is of having that in the workforce. So key stakeholders, making sure that they're motivated, engaged, and ultimately providing a productive workforce, that there's return on investment, and the data from the system helps manage that and definitely understand the impact of the LMS. When we start to consider the HR department, some of the key factors when considering that is the personalisation of learning, because not all colleagues, employees will have the same. There will be a requirement of personalisation, and how can your LMS provide that? The skills analysis and the audit trail of that as well. A lot of the HR departments that I've worked closely with have always had really manual processes. So how can the LMS support in the analysis and the data of colleagues' learning or skill gaps within the organisation? So when considering the LMS, it needs to be able to provide bespoke learning content and personalisation of the needs of each individual. How can it motivate and empower your workforce for those who want to learn or gain new skills? But also when we think about today, searching for jobs in the environment, candidates want organisations that allow them to upskill. So I guess as a result, HR teams will want an LMS that supports employees in their careers, in turn helping the department within the organisation to upskill. Equally, this is the same when we talk about talent acquisition and attrition within the business as well. So HR teams will want an LMS tool that offers to help evaluate the current skill level in their workforce, and also understanding which departments or employees need to develop skills to use their knowledge and guide their people strategy. So as we start to break that down further, we know that employees want a platform that's easy to use, is accessible anywhere, and supports their career progression. Employees want the opportunity to upskill and progress in their career. They want the LMS to support them with this by providing a smooth user experience. And they want a mix of content that's relevant both to their role and their objectives. But an LMS with an intuitive user interface, which will also provide mobile learning. This helps employees learn anywhere at any time. We want the LMS to be able to motivate employees to embrace learning, so creating a learning culture within your organisation, allowing them to access new knowledge and upskill easily. And I guess if we think about our digital world in that self-service world, employees want to be able to view their L&D progress, book relevant learning training courses, and proactively work on upskilling themselves. So the ability to do all this from your LMS can provide further value for all employees. And I guess as an employee myself, I'd equally want to learn without any complications. So when we think about line managers are always really, really busy. So how can this LMS help them manage their employees' learning journeys, career progressions? So a good relationship with their direct reports is important. And to strengthen the relationship, line managers need to be able to see where employees may be struggling in relation to the skills and knowledge, where there's some improvements, and how they can support with this. And I guess we want to ensure that employees are as productive as they can be. Line managers want to ensure that there's a right mix of skills and knowledge across their teams. And I guess if an employee were to leave, line managers want to be confident that other employees can step up with the relevant skills to cover this role. So this is also about nurturing talent, succession planning. Being able to have an LMS that provides you with the ability to see the mix of skills across the team and improve it is therefore really crucial to line managers. Automated notifications can help employees and managers track learning progress. So staying on top of everything in terms of, the line manager's normal day-to-day duties, but equally helping their employees stay on top of their learning. Having the system be able to provide that notification is also very important. Managers can track learning progress, make sure relevant learning training activities are carried out, whether this is mandatory training or developmental training. And the LMS gives managers a really quick and easy access to staff record, reviews, development plans, and this is really important when tracking the L&D progress of their employees. We want our employees, and certainly managers that I've spoken to and work with, want their employees to also feel empowered about their own learning, so taking control of that learning path and development path. So by using an LMS that give employees more responsibility over their learning, employee engagement can improve as a result, increasing employee satisfaction and ultimately retention. So when we start to think about the learning development department, a good LMS serves the L&D department as a tool to help deliver a range of learning activities with easy access and easy administration. Any system should be easy to use with a range of blended content. So we know that everyone learns differently. We know that we all absorb content differently. So having an LMS platform that can provide you with the variety of that blended learning approach is really key and important. Again, how the teams work together, creating that learning culture. So L&D being able to share user data with the HR system in logical steps. So eliminating the need to set up, modify and deleting records. So single sign-on definitely was life-changing in my previous role. The ability to make the site easy to access without having to remember lots of different usernames and passwords is also really important. HR system can interface with L&D to make sure that accurate people data and ensure the right people have access to the best of the content for their needs. So being able to access reporting, a range of information, allowing the LMS itself allows reports to be automated as well, so not having to continue that manual process and streamline some of those workflows as well. What do you want your LMS to deliver? So when you're thinking about introducing an LMS, and I know I've definitely had some learning from this, what is it you want it to do? So we often think about an LMS in terms of, I need to get some e-learning done, I need to push some training out, but have a clear understanding of the purpose. So yes, it may be mandatory training, yes, it may be developmental, but what is it that you're trying to achieve with the purpose of that? What is the purpose of the mandatory training? How does that help support and engage? And what is the purpose of the developmental changing? How does that support and engage? And then when we start to think about engagement and reward, we said that, motivation, engagement is really, really important. So how does your LMS engage your employees, engage your stakeholders, but equally, how does that reward in terms of achievements? So thinking about the content type is also really important. So who's your audience? How do they engage? Is that content appealing? Do people want to go in and learn? How does that content fit in with the culture and the values and mission of your organization? And the LMS isn't just about training. There's also that talent management and pipelining and succession planning. We said earlier on that it's really, employees want to feel empowered to be able to engage, to self-develop, having it accessible from where they want to do the training, where they want to develop is really important. But how do you use the data in the system to then pipeline your future succession and career opportunities? So this was probably one of my biggest learnings in terms of an LMS for me was always a bit, well, I can do some training with that, I can engage some employees, I can ensure that the mandatory stuff's done, I can ensure that there's developmental opportunities, but there's also so much more that you can do with that. So my experience in the LMS was being able to create a career mapping section within the LMS for employees to almost be able to have their one-to-one, have a look at the career progression, that link to jobs on a page, which was able to highlight kind of skills and experience required for that next role, which in turn linked to development programs, which linked to apprenticeships. And ultimately, we got it to a place where within the organisation, you was able to also see what vacancies were available. So for me, this was a really big eye-opener in terms of this isn't just an LMS, this is about retaining talent, this is about developing talent, and ultimately the art of the possible. There is so much more that your LMS can deliver than just training programs. I guess I could talk about that forever. I'm really passionate about the considerations and the purpose and what it is you want to achieve. And I guess some of the other key learnings in terms of dealing with vendors. So when we start to think about we're ready, we're going to start engaging, how does that procurement work? What does that look like? So we said about defining requirements, having a look in the market. What are the tools that are available? Various tools in the e-learning industry, LinkedIn networks, and even attending events such as a learning tech. Once you've gone away and kind of done your research and had to think about what vendors that you want to engage with, it's important to create a bit of a short list and arrange detailed demos. But when you're asking for those demos, it's really important when you're engaging with those vendors to be able to share your purpose and vision for what you want your LMS to do, so that when you're seeing those demos, it's helping bring to life, I guess, what's in your brain into that real world. Include your key stakeholders in that process. You want to maximize buy-in from the very beginning. So we said at the very start of that, engaging your key stakeholders, but also include them in the demo so that they can also visually see the art of the possible. So the product is really, really important, and it needs to work for your business and your organization. The pricing absolutely will be a factor, but the cultural fit is really, really important. And I guess I touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of who is your organization, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and how does that vendor support you in getting to where you want to get to? How does that vendor support you in growing your platform as you move forward? Consider both the cost of the solution and the savings of your overheads. So we said in terms of that digital transformation, the reporting that the LMS can provide, the notifications. So thinking about those workflows and the overheads that you won't necessarily need to pay out for if your LMS can provide some of those solutions for you. And really, really importantly, that internal project team is integral, not only when deciding which LMS provider that you'd go with, but how does that grow with your LMS? So who's going to deliver it for your company? Who's that project team? How are they going to be involved? What support do they need in terms of continuing to grow that LMS as well? And just some of the key learnings and I guess what you could be asking potential LMS vendors. So from a learner experience, you know, does it support and provide that blended learning? We all learn differently. Variety is really key within an LMS. How does it engage your learners? So that reward, that engagement, how does that fit with your business and your culture? Does it provide that? And is it mobile optimized? So we said about, you know, employees accessing the training from everywhere. Our working world has changed over the last couple of years, more and more people working from home. How does that fit with your learners' experience? In terms of your organizational objectives, how scalable is the system? So, you know, you may have a short, medium and long-term goal. In the short term, does it provide you with what you need? But how does it grow with you in the medium to long term? And does the software help you easily track learning? So from a line manager perspective, from a key senior management team or from a HR team, and from an employee really, how easy is it to track that learning to ensure that we are providing employees with the right level of support? And back to that, how much of that workflow, that additional workflow that you guys have in your business and organizations today, how can you automate some of that? From a commercial and account management, you know, it's really important to have a consideration in terms of, you know, what is your pricing structure? What is your implementation process, very importantly? And what support services do you offer as well? So understanding how the vendor works in terms of what pricing is today, is there increases, what does that include, what about if you want to develop some additional functionality, how is that vendor growing with the changing world, how will they implement that system into your business, how does that work with you and your team? And then it's new, so how much support is going to be available within that service? And a really key, you know, customers and testimonials. Who else uses the system? You know, go and talk to other organisations that may have already experienced working with that vendor. What does the market feedback say? You know, the reviews are endless. We're always measuring customer satisfaction in almost every single organisation. So, what are people saying? Who's used it? What's their experience been? In terms of the essential features and functionality, Andrea, I'm going to kind of reintroduce you and hand back over to you. So I guess once you've defined your requirements and your business objectives, it's then time to think about the tools, the functionality that will fulfill all of these for you.
Great, thanks, Nev. That was a very thorough sort of view of all those considerations. So lots to think about, you know, that's the sort of starting point. So, so just to kind of, as we're looking into that next sort of phase of, you know, going through that procurement piece, to having a think about what, you know, how we're going to build that culture of learning and boost learner experience. And with this really comes that ongoing debate of what's better. You might have heard about LXPs versus LMSs. You know, which is better than supporting this? Is it the humble LMS, or is it sort of its new improved version, the LXP? So I'm just going to talk briefly through what the difference is between these, because you know, often they're sort of used interchangeably. So in a nutshell, an LMS focuses more on the push approach and the administration of learning, whereas an LXP will focus more on that sort of pull approach. So by facilitating more personalized learning, empowering employees to take ownership of their learning and so on. An LMS will typically have a suite of administrative tools that will help L&D teams manage the learning programs. That'll help them to kind of select and assign content, enable you to track and assess learner progress. Of course, that comes with other reporting functions that you might need for, say, your management reporting and overall sort of compliance tracking and so forth. And of course, your mandatory training, it enables you to kind of push out that mandatory training, particularly around compliance and induction sort of processes. If we look at an LXP, on the other hand, it's all about kind of what it says on the tin, learner experience. It enables learners to take ownership of their development. It lets them sort of seek out knowledge from various sources. So you might have kind of a learning library, a repository of content that learners can access. It's not just about what they're being told to do, but what else can they discover to help with their development. That could include also external sources. It could have peer and social learning, so that the social learning aspect's becoming quite key because you've got such a bank of experience and knowledge within your organizations. Definitely think about how you can exploit that and use that through the LMS to kind of complement the more formal learning opportunities that you have in there as well. An LXP can also provide that really personalized learning experience based on skills gaps, training history and preferences, as well as sort of historical training activity. So think about, what kind of automations have in there to kind of push out new learning, kind of notify managers where they might need to intervene and provide a bit extra support if a learner is struggling and so forth. The interface will also have a more consumer-oriented look about it. So you may have seen the term the Netflix of learning being used. I know, we use a lot of learning organizations use that terminology, but it's really just to kind of signify that, what we're used to seeing, in terms of how we sort of get recommendations, how we sort of seek out content and so forth. So yeah, it's really about how they interact with content on the platform, going through searchable libraries, favorites lists, course recommendations, and so forth. So which is better? Well, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Do you want to allow your employees the freedom to explore learning opportunities and decide their own path, or have a more prescribed program of training and formal training that everyone must complete? Depending on where your organization is at, a simple LMS might be sufficient. However, if you do want to kind of take that next step, then an LXP might be what you need. But we've found from experience that having that more hybrid approach has been really beneficial for a lot of organizations and really garnered the best results for what they're trying to achieve. Without a doubt, every organization is going to have some level of formal or compliance training, and that's typically one of the main drivers for people coming to look for an LMS is they need to better track that compliance training, particularly if you're in like a regulated environment, and that audit is going to be really key for what you need to report on. But for those organizations that are looking to take that next step and really start building that culture of learning and strong engagement levels, that hybrid system can help you achieve that. So ultimately, finding a system that can help you flex and evolve your training offer, no matter what stage your L&D strategy at, is key. So the next thing I'm going to have a look at is sort of the 10 areas that you might want to consider for your kind of learning toolkit when you're out there sort of exploring vendors. So first and foremost, any learning platform you choose should have an intuitive user interface that's easy for everyone in your organization to use, regardless of technical capability. So there's going to be different ranges of digital literacy across your employee base. You want to make sure that it's very sort of intuitive and user-friendly. Equally, should be accessible anywhere, anytime. So Nev touched on that mobile optimization previously. Make sure it works on all commonly utilized browsers, that it's mobile optimized, especially important for those roles who aren't sitting in front of a PC every day. So not everyone in your organization will have access to a desktop PC, so they do need to have that ability to access it on a tablet or a smartphone. Self-service tools are also key to empowering employees to manage their learning and managers to support their teams with functions such as learning libraries to easily search for relevant content, classroom booking tools to get onto that classroom-based training easily, and manager dashboards and so on. So having that sort of information at your fingertips is quite vital. It should support a range of media to deliver blended learning and give you the flexibility to deliver not only varied formats, but also provide formats to suit every day, all the different learning styles. So again, Nev was sort of touching on that everyone learns differently. So some people will really embrace e-learning. Some people really need that more face-to-face handheld training. Others love a good quiz and assessment. It really depends on how people learn and what's going to be most effective in delivering that learning as well. So what kind of blend of that learning is best. You may also want to consider if you need to include off-the-shelf learning. So we've got a lot of customers who just kind of want to hit the ground running with some generic e-learning. They don't want to recreate GDPR training, anti-bribery training, because there's good stuff out there that you can procure from third-party content providers that then frees you up to focus on the more bespoke learning that is relevant for your organization. So you might have role-specific, product-specific learning that people need to go through, and you need that time to be able to create that content rather than sort of reinventing the wheel essentially. So have a think about, you know, what sort of blend you need for that in your content library. If we start bringing in the LXP concepts, the ability to create sort of personalized learning paths to help engage learners by providing timely, relevant training in line with defined goals is quite vital. The option to create bespoke learning content as well as curate content will enable the delivery of these programs to meet specific employee needs and really motivate them to embrace that learning. Gamification can also really help with that motivation. So thinking about badges, reward points, everyone loves something a bit shiny, you know, getting that sort of recognition of completing some training and celebrate and acknowledge those achievements. Leaderboards can also create a bit of a buzz around learning, sparking that sort of competitive streak in employees. We find particularly where we've got organizations that have sales teams, you know, they're competitive by nature. They find those leaderboards can really help to kind of drive that learning and encourage people to even make time for learning in their day-to-day roles. In line with that sort of personalized learning, skills analysis tools. So if we're thinking about, again, of those sort of talent management, succession planning, so looking at where those skills gaps are, skills analysis tools can help identify those gaps where employees might need further development and then target relevant learning content to them as a result. This can be a vital tool in your toolkit to help employees be the best they can in their role, or even ready themselves for that next career step, to highlight sort of hidden or underutilized talent within your workforce that you can then sort of build into those sort of career progression pathways. In addition to that, tapping into the expertise, so we mentioned the social learning before, so tapping into that expertise across your organization can also be made really easy through social learning tools. So think about things like discussion groups, knowledge bases, so where people can, like your sort of subject matter experts can be writing blogs to share that expertise across the business, or even capturing mentoring and coaching conversations within the LMS so that, you know, where someone is reaching out to that expertise, there's a nice record of that both the mentor or mentee can refer back to and can be built into that wider sort of L&D journey. However, all this learning is good and well, but it still needs to be tracked to ensure that learners are progressing in the right way and your organization can see the impact of learning that's taking place. Inbuilt reporting and dashboards can help you easily identify the employees who may be struggling with their learning and ensure that you make informed decisions about the direction of your L&D plans going forward. And thinking about any people systems, you know, obviously automation, time saving. So again, we touched on that earlier about sort of thinking about your current overheads, how you can automate some of those sort of more time consuming admin tasks. This will then enable you to sort of focus on those sort of, you know, the sort of more strategic aspects of your day-to-day role. So these kind of areas are really key drivers for procurement that we've seen. So an LMS is no different. Moving from paper-based records and spreadsheets to automated reports is one thing, but you might also want to think about your other workflows like enrollments in classroom-based training, reminding employees to complete or refresh sort of key compliance training or courses, keeping track of compliance risks where training is outstanding, or simply just directing learners onto relevant training based on past activity. Ensuring your platform has the ability to automate and streamline these tasks and workflows will free up that valuable time, not only for your learners, their managers, but also your sort of L&D team. And finally, the all-important data piece. So we've seen that, you know, having accurate data is key to an LMS, as it is with any of your sort of HR people systems. So ensuring that that's accurate within your LMS is going to be vital for a good user experience, and to ensure your learners have the correct access level within the LMS and are directed to the right training for their needs. That information will inform, you know, what you assign to learners. It can help you standardize sort of learning programs so that everyone who joins the organization within specific roles gets access to the appropriate training automatically, so you're not having to think about that every time you're onboarding someone into your company. By integrating your LMS with your HR platform, this can also improve collaboration between the HR and L&D teams. It will ensure that all the staff data is updated automatically without the need for manual rekeying. So really key that you get your starters, your leavers, any changes in job roles, that kind of thing is always up to date in LMS, and you're only updating in one system so that your HR system remains your central point of truth. It can also aid reporting on the impact of a learning program on outcomes such as employee engagement, absence, health and safety, and so forth. So you can combine the results of your LMS with your other people data to have a really robust view across your whole organization of how those two parts of the business are interacting with each other. What have we learned? I'm going to hand back to Catherine now, and she's going to do a bit of a recap of what we've discussed today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. Really appreciate you taking us through all those essential features and functionalities, and Nev also for sharing your perspective as an L&D practitioner of what you are looking for in a system and how you're balancing the needs of all those stakeholders, of which there are so many. It is quite easy to overlook one or two unintentionally when you're putting together your requirements list. So just going to give you a quick recap of what we've learned today, and then we'll dive into question and answer session. So if you have any questions for Andrea or Nev, now is a really great time to send them in. So first of all, you need to consider your stakeholders. Your organisation has at least 5 groups of stakeholders when it comes to your selection project. What do each of them need from an LMS? Don't overlook them. You need to get their buy-in and support for the project, so doing this work upfront will pay off in the long term. What must your LMS deliver? What are your must-haves and what are your nice-to-haves? Can you separate those out? Don't get distracted by things that look great in a demo from a vendor that actually you don't need right now, that they're your long-term nice-to-haves, and that if your basics aren't covered, then the system just isn't going to be suitable for your organisation. Draw up a list of questions to ask vendors. It's a great idea to ask the same questions of each vendor and cross-compare the answers, just as you might do when you're interviewing candidates for a new role and you want to compare how they score on the same questions. Think about doing that with your vendors too. Andrea took us through the differences between LMS and LXP solutions. Each of them have their pros and cons. Try to understand what the product in front of you is. Is it an LMS or an LXP? And does it provide the right functionality for your organisation? Think about hybrid platforms, as they may combine the best of both worlds, and that might be what you're looking for. And as I've sort of mentioned, make sure that any system you're considering can do the basics as well as the shiny stuff. Don't get distracted by the things that sound good but aren't really appropriate or won't have the business impact that you need it to. If you're doing a lot of compliance training and that's your main focus and purpose, then an LXP, for example, that doesn't offer the compliance training or the ability to track completions just isn't going to be fit for purpose in the long term. Okay, now it's time for the question and answer with Nev and Andrea. So I have a couple of questions here for them. So Nev, what are the key lessons that you learned from working with an LMS supplier in your previous role?
Yeah, so I guess I probably never really understood the functionality in terms of, you know, what was possible. So understanding more about what the LMS can do before choosing one definitely was one of the keys. So I said the art of the possible is probably my favourite thing to say. I say it a lot, but yeah, I totally didn't really take that into consideration, I guess. So what was possible? The other learning was about how important the culture fit is when it comes to selecting a vendor. So not just a system that you're working with, it's the team behind it that are going to be supporting you, and that I guess they need to understand your business, your vision, your values, your culture, and how they are going to support you in helping you achieve your goals. Definitely. So yeah, I often say, how can you translate my brain into a system that can offer me what I need it to do for the team and for the employees?
Okay, great. And Andrea, that understanding the art of the possible, that's part of the vendor's job really to explain, isn't it, and lay it all out for the potential client.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where it's really important, like Nev was sort of saying before, even if you haven't fully mapped out all your requirements, at least come to the initial sort of demo meeting with a bit of a sort of broad vision of what you're trying to achieve, you know, having thought a little bit about what your organizational culture is, what kind of things are going to, you know, fly and what won't, but, you know, ultimately what those kind of main objectives are. And then we can, you know, obviously help you start fleshing that out and asking some questions to kind of refine that a little bit more. But yeah, I think, you know, from what we've seen is where it's worked best is where we've had that two-way dialogue, because ultimately we want to provide you with a platform and a service that is going to help your business grow and achieve the objectives that you need to. So, you know, we need to have the opportunity to really understand that context so that we can help you in the best way.
Yeah, I think what we're really looking for here is the vendor that doesn't want to just sell you a system. They want to make sure that you're getting the most out of that system in the long term. So it's not just sign on the dotted line and then the relationship kind of disintegrates. It's a long-term partnership, and in some cases it might be one where your vendor is working with other third parties that you might use as an L&D department like other content providers, for example. So you need an organisation that's willing to partner with other external parties as well, which isn't always the case for some, as I've heard from some clients, but that's definitely something to think about. A question here for you from Nev, from Jenny. She asked, what, from your experience, is the best way to get employee buy-in to use the LMS beyond just the mandatory and required training?
I think it's about, it's a great question, but it's about clear communication in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve, what the LMS is there for. But the buy-in piece really comes from sharing your vision. So we spoke about having that team, that implementation team, or that internal team. So it's really about sharing the vision of what you're trying to achieve, but also getting the buy-in from understanding, you know, a colleague survey in terms of, you know, we're introducing this platform. How could this support you in your development? You know, it can do this. How does that feel? So it's really about that collaboration piece with your teams in terms of getting the buy-in, but definitely clear communication at all stages as well.
Andrea, you talked a little bit about integrating HRIS with an LMS. Is that really important for user experience and increasing uptake of the LMS platform?
I think it's one part of. I think, you know, it's making it easy for learners to access. So depending on, I mean, there's a whole piece around sort of you know, people management software and, you know, that sort of end-to-end life cycle. So having a HR system, obviously, that where you can self-serve and can easily access not only all your sort of absent, you know, book your holidays, which obviously is really important, and pay slips, but also then having that sort of one-click link through to your online learning is key. But it's also, you know, the big piece we sort of say is that the dream world is that you have that integration in place to ensure your data accuracy, because if you have a central point of truth, you're not having to update multiple systems, which can then open up to sort of human error, sort of data inaccuracies and things like that, which can then impact what kind of learning a learner uses. So if a learner, for example, sits in the sales department, they suddenly move into finance and they're still getting all the sales pathways, they're going to switch off really, really quickly because they're not getting the content that's relevant to them, because it's all happening in the background and you might not realize. So having that sort of data feed accurate is really, really key as sort of foundation for that engagement piece.
Fantastic. And Andrea, just if we just return to like the question around procurement, we sort of looked at sort of typical ways that people might approach it. What are some of the common blockers to thinking I need an LMS to actually having your hands on one and having one implemented?
It can be a range of things, really. I mean, if customers are coming to us at too early stage and haven't got initial buy-in from the organization, and sometimes that happens, you know, they're doing that initial market review and then they find that actually they're not going to get approval at the senior level, whether it's a budgetary or strategic approval to have that. So I would encourage people to have those conversations internally, you know, even just kind of flag it to whoever the sort of ultimate approvers are within the organization, just to see if there is enough appetite, because you know, you might end up wasting quite a lot of your time seeing multiple vendors, and we will nag you, you know, we will hound you for updates afterwards. So, you know, it's probably, you know, for your own sake, is just to kind of make sure there is appetite within your organization to explore these options first, and that will kind of smooth the way. From there, you can then look at getting sort of provisional budgetary approval internally. But once you've got all that bit and all's going well, on the flip side, the other things that can sometimes slow things down is the commercial aspects and the legal sort of contract negotiation. So the earlier you can get your legal teams looking at you know, software agreements and commercial terms, or if you have to have your procurement team involved, the earlier that can happen, the better, because that's going to kind of get your ducks in a row, basically. So at the point of which you've selected the supplier you want to go with, you can just kind of hit the ground running and get it all in place. So yeah, it's sort of that early and end stage, and there's often, you know, there's always little bits in between that can be a bit of a blocker as well. So
I think also just having like understanding internally who your project team is and who decisions need to run by and who's keeping the project on track from your side, not just from the vendor side, is also really important, because sometimes it can be sort of a muddying of ownership, or people think, oh, someone else is dealing with that, I'll just leave it, and then things drift, and that's quite frustrating if you're really trying to hit a deadline or complete a project, if you don't kind of keep honest with it. So now, Andrea, I'm just going to ask you in summary, like, what's the one key thing you would each like our audience to take away from this webinar about approaching choosing an LMS? Nev, I'll go to you first. Sorry.
Right. Good question. That's it. I guess it's really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve. What's the goal? What's the ambition? What is the, I guess, how does the LMS fit into the culture of your business to support the strategy? So, you know, and I guess if you're thinking about that, then you'll start to consider all of the other bits in terms of, you know, is it developmental? Is it mandatory? If it is mandatory, how do we, if it is compliance, how do we engage? How do we reward? So I think about how the LMS is a right cultural fit into your business and that relationship, and therefore it will grow with you and with your organisation.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. If your goal is something bigger than get an LMS, I think some people might just think the goal is to get an LMS, but actually it's just a tool to achieve whatever it is you're dreaming of on top of that.
Yeah, it's so much more. It's so much more. There's it's just so much more than just pushing out some e-learning and sharing some video content. So the art of the possible. There's so much you can do.
Awesome, thanks, Nev. Okay, Andrea, same question to you.
So yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Nev, but I think on the back of that, you know, because there is so much you can do, and every, you know, there's a lot of commonalities between all the vendors that are out there, but then there are those subtle differences, and there's some vendors that will offer more of one thing and less of another, and so forth. So I think that's where having that really clear. So once you've defined your kind of organizational objectives, having that really clear sort of granular list of your requirements. So what are all the things you need an LMS to do, and use that as that basis, because you know you're sort of kind of comparing apples with oranges in some cases. So at least that will give you a kind of a benchmark as which to assess all the vendors that you're going through. You can then assess the value for money against the pricing that you're getting from the vendors, because again, every vendor will have a different commercial model as well, and sometimes that could make it a little bit difficult to assess. Well, okay, I might be paying less here, but am I getting similar functionality? What am I getting for that money? So having a clear requirements list will give you that baseline to kind of objectively assess, you know, which is going to be the best vendor for your needs, in line with, you know, functionality, but also that wider sort of business context that you're looking to deliver on.
Fantastic, thanks so much. That brings us to the end of our webinar for today. We really appreciate everyone joining us today, and thanks also to Andrea and Nev for sharing their expertise. So again, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope you join us again for another Digits webinar soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.